All right, cool.
You kid skate too, right?
A little bit, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, they like to push around. I try to not push them into like sports unless they want to do it. Uh, is my kind of my philosophy on it. So hopefully they'll pick it up more and more on their own as they get to watch me do it. So cool. All right, well, let's get started. And thanks for joining us. We're talking about security monitoring for industrial control systems today with Blumira and ThreatGEN. There's a few of us on. So skateboarder Clint, it's nice to have you, founder and president and CEO of ThreatGEN.
Former skateboarder.
You wanna give a quick intro on some of your background?
Yeah, not the skateboarding stuff though. That was the long hair 8th grade me. I've been in cybersecurity or infosec or system security, whatever you want to call it, for a little more than 25 years now, exclusively in OT and ICS security since about 2003. I've worked for most of the large oil, or not for, but I've served most of the large energy clients in the world. Co-author of Hacking Exposed Industrial Control Systems, and the co-creator and lead designer of what some of you may know as the ThreatGEN Red versus Blue gamification game. And that's, I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining. And then Pascal Ackerman, it's nice to have you as well.
yeah, man.
Managing Director of Threat Services at ThreatGEN. And yeah, would love to hear your intro too.
So I came from a little different direction. I started off in the automation and control business. So I actually built machines till about the early 2000s. Then I got interested in these Ethernet cables. They went from OSD PLCs to a switch. Started to look into it. Started to get more and more involved in cybersecurity, and I slowly built that up as my main career. And well, worked with Rockwell for a while. Joined a couple of teams that did the write-ups on some of the architectural design documentation for this kind of stuff. And then eventually I ran into Clint, and we got to talk, and he told me about this new company he was starting, and he needed somebody to help him out for the services department. And I grabbed my chance, and the rest is history.
Cool. That's fantastic that you guys have been able to come together and partner. And then Patrick Garrity from Blumira. I don't know much to say about me. I have done a bit of work prior to Blumira. I was at Duo Security and did quite a bit in the space access security with 2-factors. So worked with a lot of different energy providers, Department of Energy, labs and whatnot in certain scenarios to make sure we were protecting secure access into those environments. So not as close to the problems, I'd say, as the actual industrial control systems as you guys, but certainly a piece of the equation in that regard. So let's get started, and I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll start the open conversation. I think first off, there's a range of different people on. I think there's a combination of like ICS, OT, might mix up with IoT, but curious to hear from your perspective what ICS and OT means and how that's different than IoT. If that's helpful.
That's a soapbox for me, but you go ahead. Pascal, I'll follow up with you, whatever you have to say.
Yep. So IT, OT, ICS, IoT, there's a lot of acronyms there. So basically, long time ago, we had IT space where you had your traditional PCs, you had your servers, you had your clients that were going out to emails, and you had your ICS or industrial space where we had proprietary devices, proprietary protocols that would sit there and basically automate the processes that organizations use to build a product. So and slowly over time, the two technologies became closer and closer to each other. We saw a convergence where proprietary protocols on the industrial space slowly migrated to TCP/IP stack, so that it would become a more easier to maintain, easier to get everything together, and easier to find experts to work on it, but also easier for hackers to now concentrate on devices that start the protocol that they're so used to attacking. So that's a little bit where that came in. In my opinion, if you look at pure IT, information technology, that's one side. If you look at industrial control systems at the other side, I see OT, or organizational technology, more of an overlapping terminology, where you take industrial control system equipment and protocols, and you combine it with systems that are typically seen on the IT side, which nowadays a lot of ICS systems include IT systems, and they include services that are typically predominantly IT oriented.
So that would be like your Windows underlying operating system, or Linux, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. As a good example, up to about 10, 15 years ago, an HMI, or a human machine interface in a production facility, was based on some proprietary OS, ran something that nobody had ever heard of. But nowadays, most HMIs are either based on a Windows version, a full-blown Windows OS, or an embedded or a smaller version of it.
Yeah, I think from an acronym perspective, before the world knew about industrial control systems or process control or automation, and it was just the asset owner operators that knew about it. The world hadn't known yet, but once it sort of started coming out to the uninformed, everything was SCADA. I remember everybody's talking about SCADA, and which is not correct. SCADA is one particular type of industrial control system, but ICS, so now industrial control systems, ICS is an all-encompassing term that kind of talks about all control systems. And you'll also hear IACS, industrial automation control systems, but ultimately, it encompasses several different types of control systems in the industrial space. So using those terms, and then more recently, we hear the term OT, operations technology, or operational technology, whatever you want to say. And I think on one hand, the term OT, like a lot of acronyms, calling it OT was probably driven more from the IT side and from a marketing perspective. But the way that I like to think about it is, if you look at IT, the way Pascal described it on one side, and if you look at control systems on the other side, which is mostly your physical controls, your field processes. If you look at ICS being in the field and the physics, and IT being the computers and what we know of as IT, OT to me is that thing that kind of brings it all together. OT, and that's my opinion, but OT is that bridged divide between IT and ICS. OT brings it all together. It's the technology that makes it all work in a modern sense. In terms of IoT, Internet of Things, so ICS is not IoT, and they're way different. IoT is more of a consumer grade type of embedded system technology, but more on the consumer side. Industrial control systems have been around long before the internet, and they've been around long before consumer grade embedded products, and so there is starting to be a convergence of IoT, and the whole terminology of IoT, industrial Internet of Things, really drives me nuts. But
PLC is an IIoT, right?
Yeah. But don't get me started. But but ultimately, IIoT, industrial Internet of Things, I think is to properly frame that is where you're starting to have IoT devices help with industrial tasks like the tablets and the sensors and the things that help bring industrial control systems into a more user-based, user-friendly, over the internet or network, or even like using MQTT going into putting data in the cloud. I think that's what IIoT is. But IoT and IoT is not the actual field devices and the industrial control systems themselves. So hope that clears it up for some people.
No, that's great. And then
somebody should write a book about that.
Oh, yeah, maybe so.
Hey, and I did want to encourage people to ask questions. It looks like we're already getting some, which is great in the chat. So if I can pop the chat up. Oh, good question. What about medical devices? How would you categorize those?
And
I think, yeah, you had Pascal.
yeah, I see those as little islands of automation. They have on one side, they have an IT aspect where they probably talk to a central database that's within the hospital. But the other side, depending on what those medical devices do, if they have a pump connected to them, then that's the in my opinion, that's the automation or the ICS part, the industrial part of one of those. And just because it's on wheels and you can roll it from one room to the other one, doesn't make that any different, right? So they're basically devices that span both areas of IT and OT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a few comments. X-ray room is like a DCS.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I think
the other thing is like, hey, there's also devices now connected to Bluetooth, which is more like IoT, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I think if you're talking about a physical process or an automated process, that's going to be more in the ICS type space. And then anytime you're talking about using embedded devices for convenience or Bluetooth or sending data to a cloud, that's when you start to get into the IoT type space. I mean, there's absolutely a convergence. I used to be one of these people that was just like, nope, it's ICS, it'll never be IoT. And I guess I still am like that to a point. But as times change and as technology changes and we do start to converge over the internet, I mean, there is going to be a convergence of that IoT technology with ICS technology for the same reasons that industrial control systems merged with Ethernet technology.
Yeah. I think that's great. I'm thinking of the example of SpaceX and what spaceships they're launching, and the combination of those converging. Hey, so I want to shift in and get into security a little bit more, right? In talking about when we're talking about ICS or OT and type environment, right? What are some of the security risks and what's at stake from a hey, if things get compromised perspective?
Where do we start on that one? So, like we said, we've been talking for the last 10 minutes about IT, OT, ICS convergence. So with that, any risk that's typically an IT risk has become an ICS risk or an industrial risk. But with that, where the stakes normally on the IT side are, you lose a database, you lose a web server, you might have some downtime, customers going to be upset. On the industrial space, depending on what people do or what is happening there, there's lives at stake, right? ICS control systems, they control robots, they control smelteries, they control temperatures, pressures, and all that. If you have a sophisticated hacker or a non-sophisticated hacker that just accidentally throws something over, you can have damage, you can have things blow up, you can have people get hurt, really seriously hurt, which we've seen. There's been some incidents where this happened, and even with our medical devices a couple months ago, ransomware took down a hospital, and because the person had to go to the next hospital, it was too late, and he actually died on the way over to the next hospital.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the real simple answer is the consequences with ICS are physical consequences, and as opposed to IT, the consequences are data consequences.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and I don't know what the conclusion on this was, but I remember, I think it was earlier this year, maybe late last year, there was some battleships that burned down or caught fire. And one of the theories was that, one of the OT sensors allowed the heat to get very, very hot to the point where it started to fire. And the consequence ended up being the battleship ended up, having a significant fire on deck. I'm not sure if you either of you guys heard. I think that was in California. But yeah, I remember some of the theory was like, oh, this could be a foreign government, right? Essentially trying to take down government military equipment without any physical access, right?
I did remember reading something about it. And in my opinion, that's a stupid design, right? If you have something that can overpressure, if you have something that can blow up because there's too much pressure on it, there needs to be physical controls. There need to be a physical blow-off valve that hackers cannot target from the network. And for a while there, we had companies install SIS systems, security something systems, where they had an extra set of eyes, an extra sensor next to the publicly reachable sensor that would do a final check, and if anything was wrong, it would do an emergency procedure and and stop the system. But nowadays, you see a lot of those companies put those devices, those systems on the general network as well. So they become targets again. So I'm a firm believer. If you have a process that can blow up, there needs to be some physical blow off valve. There needs to be some physical measure of emergency.
Yeah, that's kind of I think that's a really good perspective, where it's like there is a safety control that prevents that from happening from a security perspective. I don't think people are necessarily always thinking about that when they design things nowadays, right?
It's ease of use, right? We need to make a change to the security routines. Now we have to send somebody out to this platform in the middle of the sea. So instead of that, why don't we make it accessible from the regular network, so somebody over the internet can VPN in and make a change to it? But guess what? If you have somebody sitting on your network, in your internal network, a hacker or an attacker, then they can attack those systems as well.
Yeah,
Well, and in traditional control systems, safety systems are a natural part of the risk management to process automation and to all industrial systems, and for the most part, not all of them, but and so I think when you start getting into the non-traditional control systems, where you don't typically think of as control systems, like on a ship, like where you said, Pascal, there should be safety systems in place there, but you typically see it more in the traditional industrial sense. And I'm not a maritime expert, but from what I have seen is that their safety systems aren't that similar, or they don't deploy them like they do in a traditional industrial sense.
Yep. Hey, Scott made a comment. That's why we put ISO 62443 together. So it sounds like he's familiar with this space. To address risk and the new reality of IT ICS, fire control systems may have been compromised. I think he was referring to the boat. Pablo also said mechanical devices were removed as instrumentation automation devices were introduced.
Right. Yeah, and then Chad
worked on WG99 working group. I'm not sure what that is. You guys probably do now.
Thanks to Arlie for pointing it out. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chad gave you the name of the incident on the ship that you were talking about there, Patrick. But
yeah, you guys give me a little bit more peace of mind in this concept of physical prevention ideas, right? Because that never came in. I'm always like, man, why? I'm surprised more industrial control, large scale things haven't happened. And that might be some of the reason why, right? Is because
that's exactly right. I mean, yeah, when you look at it, there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that a lot of the reason why people are reluctant to deploy cybersecurity in the industrial space and operations, and the reluctance to accept that there's a cyber risk, is because there's that aspect of, well, we haven't really had a major incident, or it's not widespread from a cyber perspective. And a lot of that does have to do with the fact that there are physical safety systems in place to prevent these sorts of incidents. They've been doing this for a long time. And if you think about the goal, the objective of an attacker on an industrial control systems, it would be to do physical damage and harm. So their objective is literally the kind of thing that safety systems are there to prevent. And so it's like you've got this cart before the horse, cat and mouse chase kind of thing of shooting yourself in the foot, where we say, well, we can't get budget for cybersecurity in the industrial space, but at the same time, we like to sit there and say, well, we're not at that much of a risk because we've got safety systems in place. So it's just chasing our tails.
Hey, so you mentioned, I mean, one of the reasons people are attacking industrial controls is to try and take things down, right? Are you seeing other forms of attacks, right? Like ransomware in those instances as well, or anything else that comes to mind?
I'm going to contradict Clint a little bit on that. So what I mostly see, or what we mostly see, is opportunistic attacks where attackers get a foothold into an environment and they accidentally are in an industrial environment. So now they start probing around and they take stuff down. People, when you talk to a lot of vendors that try to sell you an appliance or a single service or something, they often come and, well, but we have Stuxnet and you can be attacked by nation state sponsors. Yeah, you can, but that's only 1% of the people out there who actually get targeted and who should be at risk for that. Most of the time, and I've posted a couple of these articles on my LinkedIn, most of the time when you have something exposed out there, it's a regular attacker who's going to use IT specific tools to take down your environment. And most of the time that's ransomware. You'll see ransomware with a note on it because that's profitable. It's not profitable to find a rootkit that works on a Siemens PLC and install it and hope to put an extra ingredient into something. And don't get me wrong, there are state-sponsored attackers out there, but the bulk of the people that should be worried about the regular, the everyday, the opportunistic stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I wouldn't say you contradicted me. You expanded upon, what, because I mean there really are there's two main objectives by an attacker on an industrial system. It's either financial or physical, right? And they can both be there. They can go hand in hand. But ultimately, the reason why even the financial motivation and malware becomes a problem and is a risk to industrial operators is because of that physical consequence as well. Still, though, where the safety systems are usually present.
And don't forget, and this is probably one of the fundamental things we should have talked about already, is that we're talking ICS space. We're talking about legacy systems. We're talking about organizations who have run their control system for the last 30 years. And probably 10 or 20 of those years, they've never done a patch. They've never done an update to their system, just because we have the mentality, and I say we because I'm a controls engineer and I was guilty of that too, but we had the mentality that if it runs, don't touch it. So things don't get updated. If you do get a piece of malware out there, I'm convinced if you bring a config or a worm into a long running operation, it's going to do a lot of damage just because everything is not being updated.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that, the Windows 2000 or Windows XP box in the corner running the $100 million system, right? And it's like, well, we're not going to spend $5 million to replace this XP box out.
I worked for a food and beverage company in the early 2000s, and they had not even a Windows, they had a 386 sitting with DOS 6.22, I think, and it was doing the separation for milk. So it controlled every single gallon of milk that flew through the plant, and they didn't have a backup system for that. If that would go down, that was it. They were down forever. But yeah, it runs. Let's hope it keeps running forever, and in the meantime, let's enjoy the profit.
Yeah, Chad said Windows 95. Yeah, yep. I can say, in interacting and talking with organizations and seeing it, it's like this year I've seen XP in the ICS side, Windows 2000. And the reality is it is that decision of like, hey, let's put the best controls in front of that in place. We actually, for customers, have a Windows 2003 hardening guide internally that we share, because it's like, yeah, there are cases where, vendors, I think, try and shame this kind of stuff, right? But it's like, yeah, this organization doesn't have the budget or the money to justify, they won't be profitable if they updated the system, right?
Well, think about it, and I've been on both sides of the equation. I think about it, a typical system to upgrade just to go to Windows 7 is probably close to 100,000. Let's say it's 100,000. You have 20 of those in your environment. That's just not feasible. The time, the money, the effort that it takes to get to Windows 7. And then
Yep.
by the time you're there, and this spiel is from a couple of years ago, so you should replace it with Windows 10 probably now. But even now, let's say you go to Windows 10. By the time you're done, that version of Windows 10 is probably obsolete, or that version of Windows 7 is obsolete, and you start all over again. So it's just really difficult to do that.
Well,
It's
and
the uptime, and it's the money requirement, right?
a lot of the other problem, or one of the other issues that causes this, is that when it comes to a lot of this, SCADA or DCS software, the vendors impose restrictions upon the operators in
Yep.
that they're not allowed to upgrade or patch or do certain things, or they'll void their warranty and support, or won't support it. I mean, so unless you only use upgrades and operating systems and patches that are approved by the vendor, you're going to lose your support. So that's one of the other issues that causes that as well, that using legacy systems and unpatched systems.
Yeah,
I want to throw in a quick freebie for those kind of systems. So if you do have Windows 2000, Windows 95, Windows 7 even, application whitelisting, it makes perfect sense in the industrial space. And on the IT side, a lot of people are very hesitant to do application whitelisting because so many things change. But we just talked about things don't change very much on the industrial side. So application whitelisting makes perfect sense. You set things in stone right now. And unless your vendor has a patch, unless there has to be a big change, nothing has to change on that system.
Hey, in the application whitelisting space, is there any products that come to mind that work particularly well in that regard?
I would say digital immunity is a really fantastic product. And there's the semantic endpoint protection agent and critical asset protection.
No, that's great. I think I agree on the whitelisting side. It's like, yeah, if you can whitelist the things that are true. I know when I was working at Cisco, they had tetration, but that's a pretty expensive and complicated product, right? That did some of that stuff aligned with, yeah, I think it's aligned with similar with like principles of zero trust, right? Which is good. There are a few other questions too. Arlie asked, do you think there will be a push for bill of materials in ICS like there has been in medical devices to identify versions of software and OS that go into an ICS?
I think only in regulated industries. And as long as you have certain industries that aren't regulated, there's a lack of motivation or push to do any sort of, I mean, and I can only speak to the industries that I've worked in, but I don't see it right now. I mean, somebody in the audience may know more than me on that, but I know that there's not a push for it, and I don't think there'll be a push for it.
No, and it's a bit
regulation,
shocking, especially when you're talking about something like the healthcare industry. I think there's some aspect of push there, right? But not across the board consistently.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's a shame too, right? Because asset management, I think that's what we're referring to mostly. Asset management should be your cornerstone of your security procedures and your security program, because you can't protect what you don't know that you have.
Yeah. So
I was going to say, I mean, yeah, that is I would say there's an informal push for it. I mean, that's been kind of the new hotness for a while now, talking about asset inventory and maintaining what OS you have in firmware and versions. But it's really difficult. That's one of the things that you see, is that a lot of people say, oh, I would love to have a complete asset inventory and list of all the firmware versions and everything out there. But when you have 100,000 devices out there, out in the field, and some of them don't get looked at for years, I mean, it becomes difficult to do.
Yep.
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
Two people said Microsoft App Locker for whitelisting.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can make that work, and if you can make it work across the board all the way down to Windows 95, yeah, it's the freebie, right? It's there. Everybody's had it in their environment for a long time. If you can manage to make it work for you, absolutely. But
yeah, I think, well, another one, and I forgot what it was called now, but the exact product, because they keep changing the product names. But I know a lot of shops that are McAfee shops, and I know some shops that swear by McAfee's application
The-
whitelisting and in-device protection. And I'm talking about certified, as in there are a lot of industrial shops that are a lot of McAfee products have been certified to work with a lot of DCS.
Now on the
So there are several options out there. But yeah, what's easiest to deploy, what's easiest to maintain, right?
yeah, get something in place. I think that's what's important. When we were talking about the types of attacks, you said more or less it's like, yeah, it's not the nation states that are coming in and making an impact. It's the people that are more or less low and slow, spraying, trying to get into IT environments, deploy ransomware, and they're not. I mean, like same observation on our side, even on the IT and OT side, is like most successful attacks are not sophisticated.
Nope.
They're incredibly easy to detect. I think the challenge is a lot of times there's either misconfigurations, lack of detection capabilities.
Exposed to the internet.
Oh
somehow.
yeah. I'm an investor at Census, right? And it was interesting when I started helping them spin out the University of Michigan. It's like, well, why does GE have 800 industrial control systems publicly accessible on the internet? Not to shame any vendors, right?
GE, you said GE?
What was that?
You said GE, right? Not
Yeah,
to shame any vendors.
I think it's GE systems where you could go and you could, in it's literally thousands of industrial control systems that you can go and see. That it's just a matter of like someone configured this probably with some IT skills, no understanding of security, because they wanted the convenience of being able to access it, right? Or RDP is similar, remote access, publicly accessible. But yeah, those are the types of things I find interesting that perpetuate. All right, Pascal froze, or is it me that froze?
No, he's just asleep.
He's sleep.
Yeah,
We need some jokes. Can we like draw a mustache on him right now?
All right, so what's the I think somebody said aren't ICS vendors required to maintain a semblance of operating system updating and patching like the FDA pushes medical devices vendors to? In a lot of instances, it's just the opposite. Like we said before, the ICS the ICS vendors sort of have power over being able to say you can't patch, you can't upgrade, or it'll cause damage or some adverse reaction to the control system. And so it's exactly, I wouldn't say exactly, but yeah, to me, it's a little bit of the opposite of being required to update or patch.
Pascal woke up.
Yeah, no, I dropped off for some reason. I don't know what's going on.
Your eyes were closed when you dropped off, so we just hey, so when we're talking about some detection gaps, right? Like what are some of the most common missteps you see happen in these ICS environments from a security controls perspective?
Unfortunately, it's still exposure. It's either exposure directly to the internet and like your Census or your Shodan search will show you that. If you go out and you look for a popular port 44818, which is an L. Bradley controller, for example, you'll see a whole list of controllers that are directly open to the internet. And the danger with that particular one is that 44818 is the port used by the Rockwell the Rockwell programming software. So you could open up your software, point at that public IP address, and start programming their PLC. That's how dangerous it is. And a lot of times you see this coming from vendors going in and trying to do some sort of an IIoT implementation where they have a cell modem sitting in somebody's network that then connects to their web-based or cloud-based infrastructure to send out data. And they inevitably, or not inevitably, they accidentally expose the entire network to the internet. And you can see that if you do a search on Shodan for that particular port, you see that most of the organization, or the organization that's behind those IPs that are out there, is like a Verizon or an AT&T, which are the cell modem routers that are out there. So that's probably the most common one we see. And then internal exposure, where people have networks that are wide open, or with best intent, they did separate their industrial and their business networks, but they put a wide open firewall in place, or they put a firewall in place that started off as a good implementation, but slowly but surely became a Swiss cheese setup where everything is just allowed. So you might as well just have one network, which it's exposure. And then again, it's exposure to the regular IT risks. So you have a wide open network, you have your industrial system sitting on the office side, on the business side of things, and now you get a piece of ransomware. Now you get an attacker on your network who has access to everything, right, to the whole network, and a ransomware attack will take down everything on that network, including all of your industrial systems.
Okay. Hey, do I hear okay, or can you hear me okay?
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
if you hear okay, but you sound okay.
Sorry. Thank you. No, I didn't realize I didn't have my headset on, and there's like the lawn service is out front going to town. So sorry if there's some background noise there for the whole call.
And by the way, I don't know if it's everybody. It looks like I'm having intermittent network issues to where now both of you just froze for me and didn't hear you for a while. I'm getting a message saying my network is unstable. So if I go in and out, that's what's going on.
We can hear you fine, which is good.
Maybe you're under attack.
Just you.
Yeah, yeah. The audience is dossing me.
No Zoom bombing yet. I laugh because I have a 7-year-old man, and he's so excited to talk about hacking, and it's hilarious because he plays video games and watches YouTube, right? And it's always like, let's go try and Zoom bomb some people, and it's like, that's not a good idea. And I think they're so used to now, like they're in school on Zoom all day long, right? So they can actually understand these concepts. So, hey, so on the detection side, right, as we're talking about industrial controls and IT as well. So a little bit on the logging SIM side, right?
That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah. So curious to hear your insight into, hey, how are people typically collecting or centralizing things out of industrial control systems and doing detection, and making sure that it actually works, or maybe none of them are, right? Curious to hear your feedback.
The real problem is that a lot of people are. So I've been guilty of this. A lot of vendors will have installed devices, automation, maybe even OT specific IDS or firewalls, and they keep pumping out these event logs and these alerts, and you have so many of these systems altogether that most customers that I've worked with, they don't know what to do with all of it, right? You have 5, 6, 7 dispersed systems that all pump out event logs. So I haven't personally, well, I have now recently, but I haven't personally seen any company go to an OT specific SIM where you take all of this together. But in my opinion, this works on the IT side, right? We've successfully done this for years now, where we correlate, where we collect, where we alert on correlated events, where we can see from multiple angles, from multiple systems, what is going on in the industry. And I think the industrial environment is ready for a proper SIM solution to do that.
Well, and I think, one thing that I've noticed is that very few of our customers' OT environment exists in a vacuum. I mean, in a lot of the times you may have the IT security team working over on the OT security side, or it's combined. And a lot of the shop, I mean, really, even some of the bigger shops, you're still combining a SOC, or you're trying to send both OT data and IT data to the same place, and so it very rarely exists in a vacuum. But no, so I would say on the collection side, you do have to have ICS specialized collection So, there's a lot of products out there that specialize in understanding the ICS protocols, understanding how to dissect those protocols, and looking at ICS specific issues and risks, like logic mistakes and things like that. So, but ultimately, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're looking at your OT cybersecurity threat monitoring in a vacuum and not combining it with the IT data, because as we've seen in many cases, especially with the ransomware, is that the adversaries are usually getting in through the business network, the IT, the enterprise network, and on through to the OT. So combining IT and OT threat monitoring effectively and getting that data correlated, I think is key to detecting threats into the OT.
Well put. Here's an example for that. For example, and we've installed Forescout and Clarity, OT specific IDSs. Now let's say one of those systems pops up with saying an unusual operator, an unusual engineer has programmed PLC XYZ. Having the means to tie that back to a compromise on the IT side is extremely valuable in my opinion. Not only do you get a centralized awareness that something is going on the OT side, you now have the means and the measures to tie that back to a compromised a workstation on the business side. So having that tie between the two, it's just invaluable in my opinion.
Cool, that's awesome. Hey, I do want to hop through just really quick on some of the Blumira side and talking through what we do talk about addressing threats, and then we can hop back a little bit more. As I'm doing that, I think Q&A is open, chat is open as well. In chat said, has there been a successful ICS attack that didn't originate through the business network? I can't think of any.
I'm sure there are, right? If you can find systems wide open on the internet through Shodan, yeah, absolutely. There's going to be compromises that way. There's actually, if you want to look up something specific on that, Stefan Hild did a research paper on it. So he put a Stephen Hild, yeah, Stephen Hild. He put a paper out there where he put a deliberately wide exposed industrial control system on the internet and just sat there and waited for stuff to happen. And the findings are really eye-opening. It's not somebody coming in and trying to put a rootkit on your controller. It's somebody trying to put ransomware on your network. But yeah, that's another way of stuff coming in. Not to go back to my own words, but Stuxnet used a USB key to get to infiltrate their systems. So there is different ways.
Exactly. That's one thing I was going to mention. It's like I don't want to keep mentioning Stuxnet. I feel like I'm taking a drink every time I do. But but yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are examples where like Stuxnet to where it was USB, but it was I think usually
I mean, like the Tesla attack was supposedly supposed to be USB driven.
Yeah, but I think it's usually combined with physical access though, right? Or some sort of other access. But yeah, you go ahead and do what you got to do on the Blumira thing, and I'll type up a couple answers here in the Q&A.
Fun. But, yeah, I think
one thing I really want to quickly say is that a lot of these things, whether it comes from the internet, whether it comes to the IT, a lot of the real heavy compromises, the ones that had a large impact, was because people didn't have insight. It took them too long to discover this, and that this is a good lead-in for the Blumira stuff, because I think having this in place that within 10 minutes, within an hour, you get to know if somebody's trying to attack you is the first step towards a really tight security posture. Go ahead.
I'll hop ahead. I do think it's interesting. I drive a Tesla, right? And I think that's the stunning example of the future of like ICS, OT. And it's probably weird to think about it, but it's like Tesla cars are a utility. They connect to the internet and they're centrally more or less connected. They have an independent system on themselves, right? But it's like The reality is if someone got remote command and control of 100,000 Teslas, just imagine the things you could do with them, right? Or you would deploy ransomware on them and they just sit there like bricks. So it's for me, I think sometimes it's kind of interesting to think like, yeah, that's somewhat of the reality of type of things that could happen, that I think aren't that far out there in reality. So I'm gonna hop to the Blumira side. We focus on helping organizations and customers with security operations challenges specifically. And I think this applies really well to OT environments because they have limited team and resources and they don't necessarily have expertise in security. And I'm not saying everyone within the space, but generally speaking, organizations might have an IT function and an OT function, and they might not even have a security team. And so helping effectively those teams. Also, the amount of alerts that kick off from different products in the environment and figuring out what actually matters and what's important. And in order to do that with traditional SIEM, it requires a lot of manual effort and fine tuning. And so, we're designed to essentially deploy in hours, eliminate noise, and provide you real visibility into threats across your environment. And as we had talked about a little bit earlier, it's like the persistent thing is the organizations getting hit by consistent IT attacks, right? Not necessarily the sophisticated aspects. And those are things like password spraying, running basic exploits like things like Blue Keep and Cobalt strikes, and just taking advantage of the fact that software is vulnerable, a VPN is vulnerable, all sorts of stuff like that. And so, sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong side, but how we do this, essentially we help automate security operations with ingestion, parsing, correlating threat intelligence, defining detection rules up front, and then surfacing and prioritizing the things that do come up and providing a playbook and what to do. And then we do backstop that with the ability to interact with our security analyst team as needed when a threat's identified, if some additional help or support is more or less needed. And what this looks like physically is, right, when we automate this on the front end, we can deploy in a matter of an hour or two and then surface the threat to you. And then in some cases automate, in other cases, when that's not possible, provide a playbook that guides you through what should be done to remediate or resolve the issue. So that's my quick and dirty high level overview. Just to hop in and take this a little bit further and throw in the product up to show you one or two examples. I'll do that. Anything else you want to say on the product side, Pascal?
No, I just want to point out that the Blumira solution is truly to help take the load out of people, right? And especially in the industrial security, in the industrial space, where people are engineers, we're controls engineers. We don't want to be bogged down with doing security tasks, and throwing this into an analytics platform that will point out the interesting stuff to look for is a valuable tool to have.
Yep, and to show some of the examples like low-hanging fruit, once we integrate with an existing product stack, right? We'll do things like detect, hey, administrator account creation, which often is going to be in a later stage of attack of deploying something like ransomware. Lateral movement via honeypot. So, hey, someone is actually scanning reconnaissance-wise on my internal network. That's a real risk and real threat to an organization that can identify someone's even on your network that maybe shouldn't be. And then I was just going to hop in, and here's an example of that reconnaissance scanning, where you might see, and in this case, with your NGFWs, with Palo Alto, Cisco, FortiGate, and Checkpoint, literally being able to just immediately block the IP addresses with which those types of scanning's coming from. And you can kind of see we stack evidence from a perspective of not creating a ton of noise and just adding more workload of closing out many tickets of the same thing. So it is really designed to enable people from a response perspective, rather than having to dive into the details and figure out what rules to put in place and how to get to effectively detecting common threats. And then the last thing I would say is, some of the other things are just identifying risk. And so things like, hey, there's a large amount of data exfiltration suddenly, or data going outbound, or more commonly, I've seen it in OT space, IT space, everywhere. Hey, there's a public IP address connecting to an RDP Windows server, right? And that just shouldn't be the case. And normally is a great way for an attacker to get a foothold within a customer's environment. So really making sure you block and tackle the basics and give visibility to those types of things as they arise. So cool. I'm going to stop my screen share and
quickly to extend on that. So where the industrial to the ICS part in this comes in is that we're seeing event logs from Windows machines, from firewalls, from switches and all that stuff in this demo. Those are typically generated in modern ICS environments, or OT environments, as I should say, as well. Additionally, we're now sending up event log from a Clarity, from a Nozomi, from a Forescout. So you will have pop-ups for that kind of stuff in the same space as well. So we have something pointing out saying, hey, something is going on. And keep in mind, we're sending up the alerts. We're not sending up to the cloud the detailed information. So just the alert saying, hey, somebody is trying to program a PLC. For the details, we still need to drill into the actual device or the actual system that generated that alert. So it's just to get awareness. It's just to filter out the noise and to get awareness to the people who can respond to this in a very convenient way.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part there, is that, you can take data from any of the ICS specific vendors, out there, the Forescouts and the Clarities and all that, and then pump that data in so that, it's not just one ICS solution. You're not relying on one thing. And like I said before, this is that convergence of the IT threat data, the OT threat data, and getting those correlations, and being able to pull from a multitude of different vendors and technologies, I think is key.
Hey, one question I have in these OT environments, right? When they have, of course they're going to have Windows, right? Are they typically setting up unique domains, for example, within those environments as well?
If they have worked with us, they probably end up with a domain. A lot of companies will either have no domain and just a bunch of loose PCs. Some have converged and are part of the IT domain. If I have my way, and my best recommendation is to have a completely separate network, separate domain, separate everything for the industrial environment.
Yeah, definitely a good best practice not to mix and mingle.
Well, if you look at some of the ransomware, some of the attacks, they use domain replication to get their malicious code across. So there has been some high-profile attacks lately that have used domain replication to install their ransomware across the board. And if you have some sort of a trust or an extended or a daughter domain or a child domain, then that ransomware will populate all the way down to your industrial environment.
It's good to consider from a configuration standpoint. Someone did ask Scott, it looks like, asked, do we integrate with ServiceNow? Not yet, we will be. And what I would say is, like, you can configure an account to send a notification via email, so it is within ServiceNow as like an interim stopgap. So if you want to get in more details from a product perspective. But yeah, what I would say is Blumira, certainly from a quick win perspective, within any type of environment, gives you very fast visibility into real threats. And I would say it's interesting, like we're focused on high accuracy, like these are real threat type of scenarios or real risks. It's interesting, in a proof of concept, I would say 50% of the time we identify some real risks that people overlook or don't realize, right? And so that's the thing that becomes important, is it's like, if you can knock that low-hanging fruit out and then continue to monitor for it, that makes a big difference from a security posture perspective. And unfortunately, I'd say with most any products, it takes organizations months to years to operationalize it, and requires them to have deep expertise. So it's a big difference from a value proposition with what we're doing, and making it easy to ramp up, get on board. So cool. Hey, so with all these ransomware account attacks, is that the reason why Bitcoin's price is so high? and what are your 2020/2021 predictions on Bitcoin's price?
I have no interest in Bitcoin at this moment. It's probably the world economy and everybody sitting and doing business from home that drive those prices up more than anything.
Yep.
But what I do want to point out is though, the Blumira solution does a great job in filtering out and sorting and only relevating the alerts that you should be concerned about. In the end, this all still comes down to the person looking at these logs or being in charge of these logs to properly address if they find something, and that's something that ThreatGEN can help out with. We have the expertise, we have the people, we have the analysts to help out, not only find and make sense of all of these alerts and to point out what is important to you, but we also have the people that can come over and help out, remediate stuff and to train your people to remediate this stuff yourself.
Hey, I would emphasize too, right? The on that aspect, and then also just in general, anything related to that regarding best practices, what to do. I mean, I've interacted with a lot of your clients, right? And you guys are able to provide tremendous value from a consulting perspective within customers' environments. So your knowledge goes really deep, right? In this specialty area, which is awesome.
And a lot of time that saves these companies from having to dedicate an engineer or to hire extra staff in their security team, just to have somebody on call. We don't have to do it 24/7. We don't have to do it 24/7. We can be on a retainer that says, okay, we found something weird. Blumira sent us this email and we don't know what to do with it. Can you help out? So those kind of relationships we have as well. But it's always good to have somebody you can say, I don't know what this is, but can you make sense out of it? And that would be us.
Cool. Hey, so it's top of the hour. I'm
already?
Sure everyone on already 2 hours or 1 hour. It's been a lot of fun. My assumption is everyone's probably got a 2 o'clock. I know I do. And so thanks everybody for joining. You can go to blumira.com, find out more about us, or is it threatgen.com? Is that the right URL?
Yep.
Yes.
ThreatGEN.com.
Yep, threatgen.com to engage with either of us, right? We're happy to help out. Yeah, my recommendation is like certainly depth of knowledge on the ICS side. ThreatGEN is your go-to in getting into details beyond just the detection portion with Blumira. They can help with so much more there. So thanks so much for joining today. And thank you, Clint and Pascal, for making the time to hop on and talk a little bit about this partnership that we've been working on together.
I'm giving thumbs up too.
Excited.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Very exciting stuff, man.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.